basically the exact same as the dreadnoughts. Now, if you're the British Empire, you always have the best navy. What do you do if the Germans build 12 dreadnoughts? Build more. So the Brits build more. What do the Germans do if the Brits build more? Build more. What do the Brits do if the Germans build more? Build more. But they're not the only international powers out there. There are other Europeans who have colonies all over the world. If you're going to hold on to your colonies, and the Brits and the Germans are trying to see who can build more, what do? Build more. There's an international arms race as we see the Germans, the Brits, the French, the Italians, the Americans. We're all building the biggest navies the world has ever seen. Massive floating battleships that can project power all over the world. Billions and billions of dollars into these things that are just huge. And there's one more power on the rise. The Japanese want in on the game as well. Now again, you guys read about the Japanese taking on a European power. Do you remember? Who did the Japanese go to war with? China? They go to war with Russia. How does it go? Who wins? What is Jessica? The Japanese basically crush the Russians. We have a power on the rise, and we're going to have to deal with them a little bit later on. Now, all of this is building and building. There's going to be one last component that really brings everything together. All of these European powers are engaged in secret alliances. But it's an alliance system that's so bizarre and so complex, it's really hard to tell if the man who made this is either an absolute genius or a complete lunatic. I'm not sure. The man who put together this system of alliances, he's Prussian. He is a German who is a diplomat, and he lives during the time when Europe is at peace. He's sick of the Europeans killing each other for years and years previous to this, so he has an alliance system that's so bizarre and so intertwined. I think he's the only one who understands it. This Prussian is a man by the name of Otto von Bismarck. And it's so complex, it's just odd. I will tell you this, I've read through his thoughts. I've seen what he's put on paper. And as you read through, you can kind of see him building a case. He says, you do this, and then you do this, and you do this, and it's going to work, and everything's going to be fine, and Europe will be at peace until it falls apart. Okay? The next chapter is the same. He builds this brilliant argument. He says, and then Europe's going to burn. Then why are we doing this? His system is brilliant, but it's so hard. He'll put together something where he says, Austria-Hungary, you are allied with them, and them, and them, but only in some instances. If this doesn't happen, then you don't ally with them, and you pick up the Russians instead. But if the Russians don't want to, then you drop them, and you drop the other allies. Maybe. Some of these things are written down. Some are just handshakes, saying, I promise I will be your ally if something happens that you might not agree to. Or maybe I won't. It's so bizarre and complex. It's almost like this machine that's perfect when it's working. But as soon as it shuts down, you can never get it started again. The first big network of alliances is found in what's called the Triple Entente. Now, it points out, this right here is not intimate. It's Entente. So who do you think is part of the Triple Entente? The French, yes. The French are allied with the Brits. Now I have to tell you, again, I don't know, genius or madness, because the Brits and French hate each other. They have for years and years and years. They never get along. And now they're in an alliance together where the Brits Brits and the French have this agreement where Britain says, I will come to your aid, most likely. But if I don't want to, I can always point to another piece of this alliance and say it's not my responsibility to protect you. So the French don't know if they can trust the Brits. They hope they can. You also bring the Russians in. The Russians are this gigantic agrarian power who the Tsar of Russia is cousins with the King of England. In fact, they're so close, they look almost identical. They write letters to each other. The King of England calls the Tsar of Russia Little Nicky. This is how weird this entanglement gets. Now, there's also someone who's coming along. Serbia is a tiny little piece of this alliance. Now, I have to ask real fast. Show of hands. Where are my oldest siblings? Have to be oldest. My oldest siblings out there, I bet you experienced something. Because I was always the youngest, so I gotta ask her. Andrew, how many siblings do you have? Just one? Younger brother or sister? Sister. Okay, what's the age difference? 2 years. I bet this happened. Andrew, does your sister ever say to you, please take me with you? I want to go with you. Not really. Okay, all right. I bet I have someone because sometimes it's brothers and sisters, maybe that's happening.
I did that.
I was the youngest brother. My brothers are 10 and 8 years older than me, and they would beat me mercilessly all the time. And make matters even worse, we had a trampoline growing up. I don't know why. It was just a lawsuit waiting to happen. My brothers would go bounce on the trampoline, and I'd say, "Can I go with you?" Foolishly, I don't know why. Because all the time they'd be like, "No, we do not want you to come out because we're going to hurt you." I said, "Okay." Still don't know why. All the time. Go out there, bounce the trampoline, they'd beat me up, they'd just be like, "Oh, that was awesome." But then I'd cry and go to Mom. You know what Mom would always say? When I'd come in and say, "Jamie and Josh beat me up," she'd say, "Stop playing with them." And the younger brother, you always say, "I want to." I don't know why. I have no explanation. In this little example, Russia's the big brother. Serbia's the little brother. And here's Serbia saying, "Take me with you. I want to come with you." This is going to be a big problem later on. Now, I promise, all of it will come together later. The next big system of alliance, though, again, I don't know if it's genius or madness, is going to be what's called the Triple Alliance, or the Central Powers. The Central Powers are Germany and Austria-Hungary. These two giant empires do share some commonality. First off, they share a border, but also they have some similar kind of ethnic backgrounds. Their people are basically the same. They speak the same languages. They have the same kind of traditions, at least in the northern Austro-Hungarian Empire. The south is going to be different. They have some common traits. But there's a third power that comes with them, the Ottoman Empire. As we know it today, as Turkey. This is an empire that's existed for hundreds of years before this, but they're kind of backwards. They're not really industrialized. In fact, they have an unfortunate nickname. The Ottoman Empire is called the Old Sick Man of Europe. What do you think that nickname suggests about the Ottomans? I had some of the other classes go, they're old and sick. Not quite that on the nose. What do you think that suggests about this empire then? Emma, what do you think?
The Turkey, like 100 years ago, not industrialized.
They're not very industrialized, you're right. So what does that nickname, the Old Sick Man of Europe, mean then? Carla, what do you think?
Die out.
They're probably going to die out. They get latched on to this, to this alliance because they want power. There's going to be a winner. You better be certain you're all on the winning side. Now, the last little bit we're going to do here, we're going to talk some pros and cons about this very complex alliance system. First thing we gotta talk is pros. The good thing is, it works. For 100 years, Europe goes without a major war. From 1815 up until 1914, Europe knows something they never have. They have peace. Because no one is dumb enough to attack someone else. Like I say, it's either genius or madness. I'm not quite sure what. But for 100 years, you have peace in Europe because every side knows if I'm France and I attack Austria-Hungary, what's going to happen? You take on the Germans too. Then what happens? Who else do you get? The ultimate man of Europe, not a good nickname, but you get them as well. Then what happens? Then the Brits go to war with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottomans. Then what happens? Russia goes to war with everyone. No one's dumb enough to start a war. Until someone does. Like I say, genius or madness. Because the con of this is, Europe is in a position where no one would be dumb enough to start a war because Europe would burn to the ground. Until one small event happens where you can't believe someone is dumb enough to do this. Where you have, and I quote, a madman in the Balkans burning Europe to the ground. Someone's going to make a decision that's going to bring about the blueprint for Armageddon. He's 19 years old.